If you're white and feeling overwhelmed about where to begin with racial reckoning, this episode is for you. This is episode 2 in my series on the framework for healing your own white history. And today we're covering the first 2 steps of a 7-step process. Step 1, learn about the history of race, and step 2, research your family tree. These 2 steps belong together because before you can understand your ancestors' stories in a meaningful way, you need that broader history of race in the United States. And before that history becomes personal, you also need a basic map of your own family line. So today is about context and orientation. I opened step 1 in the framework with a quote from Bryan Stevenson. "We need to reckon with our history of racial injustice. The great evil of American slavery was not the involuntary servitude. It was the fiction that black people aren't as good as white people." That gets right to the heart of this work. The first step in healing white history is to educate yourself about the history of race, because despite how central race is to American life, this history was often not taught clearly in school, if it was taught at all. I certainly didn't get it there. And without that history, you'll have far less understanding of how your ancestors' stories fit into the larger cultural development of racial hierarchy. That context is critical. The personal stories of your ancestors will hit differently and can lead to racial healing only if you understand the overall arc of the history of race in the United States. Step 1, learn about the history of race. In the framework, I say if you don't already know this history, the first step is to learn at least the outlines of it. You do not need to become a professional historian before you move on, but you do need a strong enough grasp of the story of race that you can begin to place your family inside of it. I mentioned that many people have helped reveal this history in recent years. People like Ibram Kendi, Isabel Wilkerson, Ava DuVernay, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Michelle Alexander, and others. And then I offer 2 main paths in the framework. If you want a strong baseline quickly, I recommend what I call the film and video shortcut. It's about 7 hours total, and it's enough to get most people ready for the next step. Here's the list. Race, the Power of an Illusion. This is a 3-part documentary series from California newsreel in the early 2000s, but it remains incredibly timely. Part 1 breaks apart the myth that race is based in biology. Parts 2 and 3 walk through the history of what the false story of race has wrought. Number 2 is Stamped from the Beginning. Adapted from Ibram Kendi's book, in the framework I describe it as intense, powerful, and illuminating. And I stand by that. It gives a sweeping, emotionally charged view of the history of racist ideas. And 3 is 13th, on Netflix, directed by Ava DuVernay. This documentary traces the line from the 13th Amendment's exception clause, which abolished slavery except as punishment for crime, through the development of mass incarceration today. It connects historical dots in a way that is devastating and clarifying. If you watch these 3 documentaries, you will have a broad outline of key developments in the story of race. These are not the only films that could get you there. I recommend them because they were particularly helpful to me, and together they provide a strong foundation that will make you ready to move on to the next step. Now, option B is the book reader path. If you prefer books, the framework offers that path. You'll get a richer and more detailed understanding than film alone can provide. The 3 core readings that I recommend in this are, number 1, Isabel Wilkerson's Caste, The Origin of Our Discontents. This book lays out how the story of race created the foundation for a hierarchical system that remains in place today. It's long, but it is deeply engaging. Second is Ta-Nehisi Coates' essay, The Case for Reparations. This essay is crucial because it traces the history of redlining through Chicago in particular, and shows how government policy helped create today's racial wealth gap. And third is Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. It's a foundational book for understanding mass incarceration as a modern system for maintaining racial hierarchy. If books are your lane, these 3 will prepare you well for the next step. Now, there's one more important part of step 1 in the framework. building your empathetic muscle. This process asks white people not only to learn history, but to build empathy for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And empathy is not just an innate trait. It's a skill. It can be developed. So I encourage you to read at least one first-person narrative by a BIPOC author centered on racial experience in the framework. I mentioned two strong options. Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me and Ijeoma Oluo, So You Want to Talk About Race. This matters because emotional connection, not just information, is core to this work. Now, the list in the framework is intentionally not comprehensive. I also mention works like Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's An Indigenous People's History of the United States, Ibram Kendi's books, especially including Stamped from the Beginning, and Heather McGhee's The Sum of Us. The point here is not to consume everything. The point is to get a solid, relatively recent grasp on the full arc of the history of race, enough for you to get started. And if you're not sure whether you already have that foundation, my recommendation is simple. Watch the 3 films. Even if they reinforce what you already know, they often can create new emotional connections to the history. And again, that emotional connection is part of what makes this process transformational. Once you have that historical context, step 2 is to research your family tree. Now, at this stage, you are not trying to build fully developed stories about individual ancestors. You're gathering just an overview, their basic names, dates, and places. The purpose here is to understand when and where your ancestors first encountered the American story of race. In the framework, I suggest starting with either your maternal or paternal line, whichever one feels right to you. Maybe you're more curious about one side than the other, you already have data on one side feels more in need of racial healing, or maybe you just want to flip a coin, and any of those is fine. Then you start building backward through your direct line, just parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents, and so on. For each person at this stage, you're just trying to collect the basics: when they were born, when they died, where they lived, who their parents were. That's enough for now. And ideally, you want to go back long enough to find at least one immigrant ancestor, someone among the first generation of your family to arrive on American shores. Now, if you get stuck before that, don't fret. You can choose from the ancestors you've already found or switch to a different family line. In the framework, I mentioned Ancestry.com as a tool, but I also note that if the subscription price doesn't work for you, there are other options, including a lot of ones that have free memberships. These are tools like Family Search, MyHeritage, WikiTree, and the others here you see listed on the page. These tools can help you search public records, like U.S. Census data, directories of property, and more. Sometimes these include private family trees that may already include your ancestors. And for many white Americans, because ancestors were more often recorded in census and property records than enslaved Americans were, there is a very good chance you can trace at least one line back a long way, sometimes to the first person in your line to immigrate here or even beyond. But I also give a warning in the framework. Once you start building a family tree, it is easy to go down rabbit trails. Now, if that's fun for you, great. But for the purposes of this project, you do not need to go down chasing every lead. For this step, you just need enough to build an outline. If someone in your family has already done this work, step 2 may take very little time for you. If you're starting from scratch, it may take quite a few hours. In the framework, I say that if you stick to basic data about direct ancestors and you avoid going down too many rabbit trails, most white folks could probably complete this in under 15 hours. Though of course some will take longer and some will do it in a shorter amount of time. So don't let perfectionism stop you. This step is not about building the world's greatest family tree. It's about creating a usable map for the next stage of healing work. So that's episode 2. Step 1, learn the history of race. Step 2, research your family tree. Step 1 gives you the historical arc, and step 2 helps you locate your people inside of that arc. Once you have both, you're ready for the next move. In episode 3, we'll cover step 3, how to choose one ancestor to focus on first, so you can move from overview to a specific human story. If you want the full framework for healing your own white history, it's available free on my Substack. Start with context, build the map, then get started. I'll see you again soon.